Imagine walking into a bank with your life savings, expecting respect, only to be treated like a criminal because of how you look. This is the story of Harold Thompson, a man whose quiet dignity exposed a rotting system and the son who turned his pain into justice. Could one envelope change an entire bank forever? Let's find out. 6:12 a.m., Lincoln Avenue, Detroit. Bus 24 hissed and rolled off the empty lane. Harold stepped down, old shoes coated in red dust, like a life that had walked roads no one ever paid attention to. He gently straightened up, hand tightening around a frayed cloth envelope held close to his chest. His breath slowed. His eyes, aged but still clear, lifted toward the glass building ahead. A bank. To most, just a place for transactions. But to him, it was a test of trust, a quiet risk, a place where memory, dignity, and hope all walked in together. And maybe a fight he never wanted, but could no longer avoid. The bank's logo gleamed on the glass. His eyes paused on it, somewhere between hope and caution. His shoulders slumped slightly, not just from age, but from years that had taught him how to endure without ever bowing his head. Harold Thompson wasn't just any man, a retired factory worker. He had spent 40 years in Detroit's auto plants, saving every penny to buy a small plot of land, a dream for his family. He had faced prejudice before, from coworkers, from landlords, but never let it break him. That cloth envelope? It held the sale of that land, his life's work, meant for his grandchildren's future. No one inside that building knew that within hours, the man they wouldn't bother to notice would force their entire system to stop and look inward. No one knew. The cloth envelope he clutched wasn't just a deposit of life savings. It was a mirror. It was a mirror, reflecting everything they chose not to see. Do you believe that sometimes the one who seems the weakest is the one holding a truth strong enough to flip the whole board? 6:45 a.m. Lincoln Avenue, downtown Detroit. An older black man, silver hair, a worn brown coat, stood like a shadow in the middle of a city that never stopped moving. A glance from anyone? None. A simple, "Good morning?" Not a chance. But what they didn't know was that his silence would become the loudest sound this bank would ever hear. That morning, Harold Thompson would be judged, dismissed, humiliated, not because he did anything wrong, but because of the color of his skin. And what they, the ones in white shirts behind the counter, couldn't possibly imagine was that the man they looked down on was the father of the very CEO who had just acquired this entire banking system. So if you're listening to this story, remember one thing. Not every hero wears a cape. They just walk in with a cloth envelope, a pair of worn-out shoes, and a truth strong enough to blow the lid off a rotting system. And if stories like this move you, if you believe in justice, in healing, and in hope, hit that subscribe button to Cozy Heart Stories, because maybe one day your story will be the one that gives someone else a reason to believe again. Tell me, have you ever thought that a simple visit to deposit a check could become a moral test for an entire institution? That's a rather large amount for a walk-in, she said, eyes scanning him and not kindly. Yes, ma'am, Harold replied gently. I sold a small piece of land. Then calmly, he handed her the documents. But instead of directing him to a teller, Melissa simply said, "Please have a seat." She lowered her voice, whispered something to the colleague beside her. That one glanced at Harold, suspicion written all over his face. A few minutes later, a white woman approached. Cream blazer, heels clicking confidently, posture crisp, smile, polite but cold. Her name, Cheryl Martin, branch manager. We'll need to verify a few things, sir. Cheryl's voice, soft but sharp enough to cut. There have been a lot of check frauds lately. Harold took a slow breath. Still calm. This is a certified cashier's check, he said quietly, issued through a transfer company and verified by the county office. The documents, clear, legit. But Cheryl had already made up her mind. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Sir, where exactly did you get this kind of money? Her tone dripped with suspicion, loud enough for nearby customers to turn. Harold met her gaze, steady. From selling my land, ma'am, it's all in the papers. Cheryl smirked, faint, tight. Well, we'll see about that. People like you don't usually walk in with checks this big. We'll need to contact our compliance department. And just like that, with one line, she turned him into a suspect. Even when he'd done nothing wrong. Harold felt it rise, a quiet helplessness pressing against his ribs. He reached for his phone. dialed. His voice, low, slow, but still holding something that dared to hope. "Son, do you think you could stop by the bank today?" On the other end, Damian went silent, just for a moment. Then, "I'll be there, Dad." Harold's hand trembled as he held the phone. He hated asking for help, especially from Damian, who had clawed his way above the same kind of bias now breathing down his neck. But this wasn't just about him. It was about every man who had ever been made to feel small. "I'm sorry, son," he whispered. "I just need you here." A beat, then, "And maybe it's a good time to check on that new branch anyway." He hung up. No complaints, no sighs. Just action. Took off his blazer, swapped for jeans, pulled on his work boots, a hoodie, baseball cap, glasses, beard, neatly trimmed. And instead of driving his own car, Damian took the bus, because no one in that bank had ever seen their CEO step off public transportation. Sometimes, one look, one gesture, is all it takes to reveal a bias that's been growing quietly for years. When Damian stepped off the bus, dust on his boots, cap pulled low, backpack slung over one shoulder, he walked straight toward the glass doors of the bank. The security guard stood by, white, broad-shouldered, arms crossed like a locked gate. His eyes moved slow, sweeping Damian from head to toe, then stopped. A subtle chin tilt, dismissal. No greeting, no smile. Just a look that said, "Yeah, we get guys like this all the time." A wink, a half smirk, a nod toward the front desk, no words, didn't need any, they both understood. Black man, jeans, took the bus. One of those customers. Not important. Damian didn't react, he simply walked past them, calm, steady. But his eyes, they caught everything. He stepped inside. "Good morning," he said softly, approaching the front desk. "Do you have an appointment?" Melissa asked, without even looking up. "No," Damian replied. "I'm here to help my father complete a transaction. There seems to be a bit of an issue." Melissa didn't ask his name. "You'll need to wait. Our compliance team is currently reviewing the KYC status." Damian sat down, quietly, unhurried. He turned back toward her, his tone polite, even. "Excuse me, normally how long does a transaction like this take to process?" Melissa looked up. "Well, it depends on the case." Damian nodded slightly. "My father's case, it's a certified cashier's check. Would that fall under any special category?" "That's considered a flagged transaction," Melissa replied. "We need extra verification because of the large amount and the fact there's no linked account." Damian offered a faint smile. "I see. And who handles that verification step?" "That would be the Risk and Compliance Department." "Oh, so what stage are we at now?" Damian asked, tilting his head slightly, like he was just thinking out loud. Melissa glanced at her screen. "No response yet. We're still waiting on the system to return results." Damian nodded, thoughtful. "And a flag like that, where does it usually come from? Is it automated or does someone manually mark the transaction?" Melissa hesitated. "Could be the system, or maybe someone flagged it for extra review." Damian didn't blink, just jotted a note in his small notebook. "Can I speak with the person who initially handled the paperwork?" A young teller stepped out, didn't look at Damian, didn't greet Harold, just muttered, "It's under review. We'll call when it's done." Then turned and walked away. Damian said nothing, just added another line to his notes. "And who's the supervisor on duty?" he asked, calm as ever. "I'd like to understand the process more clearly." A middle-aged woman emerged, tidy outfit, face blank. She looked at Damian like the whole thing was beneath her. "We're following protocol," she said flatly. "Please take a seat." No further explanation, no apology. She turned and walked off. Damian stayed silent. No pushback, no confrontation. Just still, watching, listening. But inside, his mind was recording everything. Every glance, every gesture, every careless word dripping with disrespect. He didn't write it down, but his memory was already building a living report. And what no one around him knew was that the man they were dismissing, with the gray hoodie and dust-covered boots, owned the system they were so proudly abusing. And then, the truth started showing itself. Not through shouting, not through drama, but through the everyday things people do when they think no one's watching. Damian noticed the receptionist smiling at a well-dressed white customer. Then, moments later, turning stone cold toward two black guests who had just walked in, he saw coffee trays only delivered to those who looked the part. Tailored suits, polished shoes, and the others, the ones dressed simpler, they were told where the water was. if they even got directions at all. Then, he overheard Cheryl, the branch manager, lean into a floor supervisor. That client slipped something extra, so bump the file to priority, will you? No one saw anything wrong, because to them, this was just how things were done around here. But this time, someone noticed, and that someone was getting ready to change everything. 8:47 a.m. Through the tall glass window, Damian looked up. A silver Range Rover pulled up outside. License plate, small logo on the windshield, unmistakable. The man who stepped out, Gregory Lansing, CEO of Langston Bank, Montrust's biggest competitor. And from the passenger side, Cheryl Martin, branch manager, the same woman who'd made his father sit in silence for over an hour this very morning. They shook hands like old friends. No attempt to hide, no caution. Damian didn't blink, didn't move, just one moment, one look. But it said everything, because when you know exactly what's broken, do you keep pretending you don't see it? Or do you start preparing to flip the whole table? That afternoon, an email went out from Montrust's senior HR division. Subject, routine security rotation between branches. The reason? To re-standardize safety protocols and unify operational procedures across the system. The old team, reassigned to another site. The new team, quietly stepped in. Same uniforms, same posture, nothing looked different. But they were Montrust's own, handpicked, trained directly by the internal oversight unit. They knew how to watch, they knew when to stay silent, and most importantly, they had one mission. Turn the cameras back on, record everything, every glance, every envelope, every routine behavior this branch had normalized for years. They didn't act suspicious, didn't change their tone, didn't raise alarms, but behind the scenes, everything shifted, quietly, precisely, without leaving a trace. The new security team, dressed like regular staff, had begun their real work. They rerouted all internal footage to headquarters, adjusted blind spots and camera angles, extracted backup audio logs from hidden servers, reviewed all access logs to the internal system, every action, every file request, even those marked internal only. No one noticed. No one suspected a thing. At the same time, Damian hired a private investigator, not from a law firm, not connected to the bank, just one person, with one job. Uncover the truth about Cheryl Martin, who she met, what she transferred, her personal banking history, her ties to Gregory Lansing. Everything kept completely off the radar. No one inside the branch knew that while they went about their normal routines, every step they took was already under surveillance. And when the truth could no longer be hidden, the only question left was, who would have the courage to face it? Monday, 9 a.m. An internal email was sent, subject line, all staff required, meeting, level 2 conference room, no explanation, no attachments, just one line, your presence is mandatory. 9:08 a.m., level 2, conference room, white lights, thick air. Like a storm about to break, everyone was present, but no one knew who would still be there after today. Cheryl Martin stood, confident smile, polished tone, ready to lead another routine meeting. But then, Damian rose. No words, just movement. He took off his glasses, set them down. The room fell silent. Before we begin, he said, voice steady but sharp, let me introduce myself properly. He pulled off his baseball cap, revealing eyes that had seen everything. I'm Damian Thompson, CEO of Montrust, and the man you humiliated this morning is my father. Gasps. Cheryl's face drained of color. Composure shattered. Damian paused. Let the truth settle. Then, quietly, has any customer faced issues with a transaction recently? Cheryl glanced at her team. Heads shook. One manager chuckled nervously. Just a misunderstanding. We follow procedure. Damian's gaze hardened. He placed a thick folder on the table. Thud. The sound rang like a gavel. So then, his voice, calm, measured, I'd like to present a few findings from an independent audit. Damian didn't rush, didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. He opened the folder, turned to the first page, slow, deliberate. In the past 2 weeks, he began, we conducted an independent review of this branch. Eyes shifted, back straightened, fingers curled tight against polished wood. These, Damian continued, are the key findings. Intentional delays in processing transactions for Black customers, even when documentation was complete. Preferential treatment based on appearance, clothing, or perceived wealth. like the type of car they arrived in, bypassing compliance protocols when customers offered bribes or had personal ties to staff. And finally, clear evidence of unauthorized, deliberate data sharing with Langston Bank, our primary competitor. The room fell silent, frozen, still. Damian turned toward the screen, gave a slight nod. The screen lit up. First clip, Harold entering the branch, taking his seat, waiting. Next, the front desk. Receptionist leans over, whispers something into the phone. Cut to the security guard, glancing sideways at Harold, smirking. Then, a white customer walks in. Just moments later, he's offered coffee, escorted directly into the VIP room. Next, an audio recording plays. A woman's voice from the front desk. He got off a bus. Flag it. Make sure no one gets blamed for this later. Then, an internal report flashes on the screen. A spreadsheet, row after row. Every transaction delayed the longest, linked to customers without preferred profiles. A red column blinks. Flagged, do not prioritize pending verification. And finally, an email from Cheryl Martin to a recipient within Langston Bank. Subject, transaction flow breakdown by client industry, internal use only. Silence, total silence. No more polite nods, no more quiet laughter. Only eyes fixed on the screen. And breath held like it might break the room apart. At the back, chairs begin to shift. No one stands, but it feels like the whole floor just tilted. The junior employees whispers, furtive glances, eyes wide, like they just witnessed the impossible. One young teller seated at the corner leans toward a colleague and murmurs, "That is Cheryl's voice." Middle row, mid-level managers, frozen in place. No one dares take another note. One of them taps a pen nervously against his notebook, his hand shaking, eyes darting toward Damian again and again, searching for an exit. Or maybe a shred of forgiveness. A credit supervisor sits upright, jaw tight, fingers locked across his chest like bracing for the wave he knows is coming. No one speaks, no one moves. The room? No longer a meeting. It has become a silent courtroom, and the evidence undeniable, unforgiving. Echoing through air saturated with regret. The atmosphere sinks. No one shifts, no one even dares to breathe deeply. A few employees start to sweat, foreheads glistening, shirts clinging like guilt that won't let go. Cheryl Martin frozen, her hand clutching the edge of the table, not a word, not a breath. Nothing escapes her lips, her face, like it's been flash frozen in the middle of July. Melissa, the front desk receptionist, keeps her head down, both hands gripping the hem of her blouse like she's trying to disappear into a shadow that no longer exists. A young teller, third row, bounces her knee uncontrollably, eyes fixed on the floor, lips trembling, like one more breath would send the tears spilling over. A department supervisor, once proud of his procedures, now buries his head in his hands, palms pressed hard against his temples, breathing, sharp, fast. He won't look at the screen. Can't. And then a voice, not loud, not clear, but shaking and wet. A young teller stood, voice trembling. I didn't know it was wrong. I just followed what Cheryl told us. A middle-aged manager cut in, tone defensive. This is how banking works. We flag risky transactions. It's protocol. Another teller, eyes downcast, voice barely above a whisper. I saw how he treated Mr. Thompson. I should have said something. I'm sorry. The room buzzed, tension rising. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others glared at Cheryl. She sat frozen, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Damian nods, slow, measured, like he's giving the whole room just a little more time to see themselves clearly. He doesn't speak right away. He just looks, his eyes moving from face to face. The young teller. Melissa, the credit department lead, each of them, head bowed. None could escape that gaze. Then he speaks, soft voice, but every word sharp, steady, like a blade slicing through layers of denial. I know, his voice low, some of you are struggling. Some got swept up in an old culture and never realized how far off course you were. He looked down, eyes resting on the open file. Then, slowly, lifted his gaze. Locked eyes with Cheryl. But today I didn't bring emotion. I brought truth, and truth doesn't make exceptions. The room. Silent, still. Damian picked up a single sheet of paper. No projector, no dramatic pause, just his voice. Steady. Among the evidence we collected, there's an audio recording. In it, you told your floor supervisor, let him sit there. Don't bring someone like that into the main lobby. It makes the bank look bad." No one spoke, no one moved, only the sound of breath, heavy, uneven, and that feeling, like the whole room had just been stripped bare by a single sentence. Cheryl stood frozen, her face pale, as if every drop of blood had drained from her skin, her hands visibly trembling as she reached for the envelope handed to her by legal counsel. She tried to stay composed, back straight, shoulders square. But her eyes, they couldn't rest. They darted from one damning line of evidence to the next, flashing across the screen behind her. No room to argue, no cracks left to squeeze through. Finally, her voice came, barely above a whisper. "I misjudged the man, and completely misunderstood the position I was in. I know, I have to take responsibility. I should have never let pride or personal gain push me to betray this branch and hand sensitive data to a competitor. I damaged our customers' trust and directly harmed the reputation of this entire system." She paused, took in a shaky breath. "This is a mistake I can't undo." Damian turned to the legal team, nodded once. One of them stepped forward and laid a sealed folder on the table in front of Cheryl Martin. The attorney's voice, calm but firm. "We have forwarded all evidence regarding the disclosure of internal data to a direct competitor, to the Federal Compliance Bureau and the Detroit Police Department. Your meeting with Mr. Gregory Lansing that morning was recorded by the external cameras at Langston Bank. And the files you sent via personal email accounts have been fully recovered from the internal archival system." No one said a word. No one came to her defense, because the truth was as clear as daylight. Damian looked around the room. There was no anger in his eyes, no revenge. Just a quiet message, no more turning a blind eye. No one here is being falsely accused. Everything has been independently verified. And for those of you hearing this now, his voice softened, you still have a chance. But second chances don't come from empty promises. They come from action. 1 week later, the Detroit Police Department released their preliminary report. The announcement went out across all internal networks and official legal channels. No explanations, just facts, laid bare in writing. Cheryl Martin was officially charged with disclosing and exchanging confidential information, causing significant harm to the corporation. Clear evidence indicated she had received personal benefits from representatives of the competitor, Langston Bank. Files, internal data, voice recordings, fully recovered. Each piece confirmed severe violations of professional ethics and the law. This was no longer an internal matter, no longer a misunderstanding. It was now a criminal case, and justice had a name. An internal bulletin was sent out just hours after the staff meeting. The headline was clear: no fluff, no spin. No one was scapegoated. No one was falsely accused. Every decision was made based on verified evidence, transparent investigation, and the law. Back in the conference room, Damian turned and looked Cheryl in the eye. His voice was calm, but his gaze left no room for excuses. "You didn't just insult a customer," he said, pausing. "You betrayed this entire organization." No one objected. There was nothing left to say. Cheryl Martin was terminated on the spot. 3 mid-level managers and 2 tellers, those who had directly violated ethical conduct, were dismissed immediately after the meeting. Melissa was suspended, ordered to complete a mandatory retraining program. Not because her violation was severe, but because she chose silence when she should have spoken up. That very day, Montrust officially launched a full-scale restructuring of the Detroit branch. All remaining employees were enrolled in a mandatory 3-week intensive training program focused on professional ethics, fairness in customer service, proper client interaction standards. Special task force from headquarters was dispatched, not just to oversee the transition, but to support staff morale through this sweeping change. No one was left behind, but no one was exempt. Leadership roles were reassigned, strictly based on merit, not tenure, not connections. Only capability. The new branch manager, a black woman with 15 years serving Chicago's South Side community. She didn't speak loudly, but when she stepped into the branch lobby, every eye turned, not because of her title, but because of the calm confidence and trust that radiated from the way she listened, even to the smallest good morning. The customer area was transformed. New seating, lower, more accessible for the elderly. a large customer rights board prominently displayed, a real-time feedback system installed at every counter. Within just 1 week, customer satisfaction soared from 61% to 89%. One elderly customer left a simple note. "It's the first time I was called by my name, and someone actually asked if I needed anything else." Weekly bulletins now displayed branch satisfaction scores, along with real customer comments, so every employee could clearly see how far they'd come and feel proud of it. As for Damian, he didn't stay in the executive office. Instead, he held an open forum right in the bank's lobby. No microphone, no podium, just a simple wooden chair and a whiteboard beside it. Local residents were invited in. They sat, they spoke their truths. Damian listened to each one. No interruptions, no recordings, just his eyes and his presence. By the end of the afternoon, as the last few people began to leave, he stood up and said, "We didn't just fix mistakes, we're rebuilding from the inside out." 1 month later, Harold stepped back into the bank. His old shoes echoed on the polished floor. Same lobby, same glass doors. But this time, no cold stares. The new manager greeted him with a warm smile. Harold paused. His eyes traced the spot where he'd stood. Humiliated. "I never thought I'd feel human here," he said softly, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me back my dignity." Damian stood beside his father. No more hoodie, no more baseball cap, just a pressed suit. But his eyes, still the same, sharp and kind. Mr. Harold leaned down and signed the documents. When the banker handed him another form, he tilted slightly toward his son. "I didn't think just one envelope could lead to all this." Damian smiled, softly, his eyes still following the new teller's movements. "And I didn't think the truth could be so easy to overlook." In the far corner of the lobby, a local news crew was present. They captured the moment, a father and son opening an account together, just like any other customers. A reporter stepped forward. "Why didn't you reveal who you were from the start?" Damian turned to her. "Unhurried, unarmed, unpolished. If I'd walked in wearing a suit, they'd have just put on a show. I needed to see the roots." Then he paused, his voice dropped low. "And what I saw wasn't just broken policy. It was humanity." Of course. But thank God, some things can still be corrected, if we're brave enough to begin. A few weeks later, Montrust launched a full-scale audit of customer service practices across the entire system. No one was left out. No one was told, "This doesn't concern you." Damian released a new slogan. Not long, not flowery, just true. Integrity isn't taught in a seminar. It shows when no one's watching. The Detroit branch became a model, not because of scandal, but because of how they made it right, bravely, fairly, without deflection. And what about Harold? He didn't lead a rally, didn't give a speech, didn't command anyone. He simply walked into a bank, carrying an old envelope, and held on to his dignity, while others forgot how to see it. He became a symbol of a quiet revolution, of a resilient father, of a system forced to confront itself. Have you ever witnessed discrimination unfold right before your eyes? If you were Harold, what would you have done? Would you have said, "Handle this quickly, my son is the CEO of this bank"? Or would you stay silent and watch how people treat you when they think you hold no power at all? And if you were Damian, would you dress like everyone else, ride the city bus, and show up unannounced just to see the truth as it really is? Or would you walk in, tailored suit and title in hand, forcing everyone to stay inside the lines of polite performance? This happened at just one branch, but its echo was loud enough to shake an entire industry. And if you're living inside a system already rotting from within, then maybe you are Harold, or maybe you're Damian. Where are you watching this from? Have you ever seen a moment of discrimination get overlooked? Tell us how it made you feel. Tell us what you did. We're listening. This is Cozy Heart Stories, where real stories spark real change. If Harold's quiet stand moved you, subscribe to join us. And share this with someone who needs hope. Ever faced unfair treatment at a bank? You have rights. Ask for a manager, or file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Because one voice, one envelope, can change everything.